The third placement director said it with the same careful expression the first two had used, as if the words tasted better when delivered softly. "She's simply not a match for our cohort, Officer Orrath. I'm sure you understand." Orrath understood. He had understood the first time at the Theron family shelter on level 12, where the director had used the phrase disruptive integration profile. He had understood the second time at the Vethkai community house on the outer ring, where the phrase had been temperamental misalignment. Now, on level 4 of the Dreven transitional hub, the phrase was not a match, and Orrath was beginning to think all three directors had learned their rejection vocabulary from the same training document. He looked through the observation window at the girl. Mira sat cross-legged on the floor of the intake room, surrounded by every piece of hardware she'd managed to unscrew from the chair beside her. The chair's back panel lay flat. Its support struts were arranged in a row by length. She was holding the smallest strut at arm's length, sighting along it the way a surveyor might, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She was 9 years old. She had lost her parents 6 weeks ago in a pressure seal failure at the Caldwin colony. She had brown hair that refused to stay flat and a habit of holding her breath when she thought no one was watching, as if she needed to be very still to think clearly. The intake report described her as persistently curious to a disruptive degree. The report before that said, "cannot leave functional objects in their original state." Orrath had been a placement officer for 14 years. He had placed 462 children. He had never had one rejected by 3 facilities in a row. "She'll have the chair back together before I reach you," he told the director. The director blinked. "I beg your pardon." "She's figuring out the chair's tolerances. Once she knows them, she'll reassemble it. She always does." Orrath watched Mira begin slotting the struts back into position with methodical care. "The Theron shelter lost 17 unscrewed panels before they called me. All 17 were put back correctly." The director had no reply to this. Orrath said he would be in touch, gathered Mira and her single bag from the intake room, and walked her back to the transit elevator without explanation. She matched his pace without being asked. After a moment she said, "Was that a no?" "It was. Because of the chair." "Partially." She thought about this. "I put it back." "I know. So the chair is fine." "The chair is fine." "Then what's the problem?" Orrath did not answer right away. The transit elevator opened and they stepped in. He was a Vethkai, gray-skinned, tall, with the wide amber eyes his species used for low-light reading, eyes that had, over 14 years of placement work, learned to show very little. He had 6 more facilities on his approved list. At the current rate of refusal, he was going to run out. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. Mira seemed to find this a satisfactory answer. She pulled her bag onto her lap, unzipped the front pocket, and produced a small object she had evidently built from salvaged components, 2 climate sensor housings, a comm relay coil, and what appeared to be the hinge mechanism from a door latch. She turned it over in her hands, examining something on its underside. Orrath watched her. "What is that?" "A pressure differential reader. The Caldwin seal failed because the secondary sensors were misaligned. If someone had had one of these, they'd have seen the variance 3 days out." Orrath said nothing. "I built it from the broken stuff in the intake room." "The stuff in the bin." She looked up at him briefly, then back at the device. "I wasn't going to keep it. I was going to give it to the director for their safety kit." The elevator arrived at level 7, where Orrath kept a small office between his transit shifts. He led her down the corridor without speaking, unlocked the door, and set her bag inside. The office was cluttered with 14 years of placement files, a dying plant his assistant kept forgetting to water, and a framed photograph of a Vethkai woman with warm amber eyes standing at the railing of an observation deck, somewhere Orrath hadn't been able to visit since. Myra looked at the photograph. Is that your wife? It was. She didn't ask what was meant. Children who had lost people understood the grammar of it. She sat in the chair across from his desk and looked at her pressure differential reader. Are you going to keep trying to place me? Yes. Even though nobody wants me. Everybody wants someone who can build a working pressure sensor from bin salvage, Orrath said. They simply haven't realized it yet. She looked up at him. Something in her expression shifted, not quite hope, but the space before hope, where a person decides whether to allow the possibility. My dad used to say that, she said, about not giving up. He had a different way of saying it. What way? She turned the device over in her hands. Keep moving forward. The fourth facility was a joint species residential cohort on the station's agricultural tier. The director there was a Drevani woman named Solis, who had the brisk manner of someone who had heard every difficult placement pitch, and had decided efficiency was kindness. She lasted 11 minutes before she called Orrath back into her office. She rewired our irrigation timer, Solis said. In 11 minutes. The old timer had a 40-second lag in the moisture sense cycle. Hers doesn't. Is that a no? Orrath asked. Solis put her hands flat on her desk. I don't have the certified instructors for a child with that kind of technical aptitude. It's not a rejection. It's a capability mismatch. She'll be bored here inside a month. She won't complain about it. I know she won't complain. Solis rubbed the bridge of her nose. That's worse. I don't want to watch a child like that go quiet. Orrath was quiet a moment. The Caldwin colony, Solis said. Both parents. Both. Solis looked out her window at the irrigation rows below, where Myra was crouched beside a sensor node, holding her breath, thinking very still thoughts. What do you need from me? A temporary boarding certificate for 30 days, while I continue placements. Solis signed it in under a minute. Orrath went back outside to collect Myra. She had fixed a second sensor node while waiting. She didn't mention it. He didn't ask. The message from the cleansing order arrived on the 41st day. Orrath read it in his office at half past the third transit cycle, while Myra was in the corridor outside building what she described as a better door hinge for your supply cabinet. The current one sticks. The message was a formal notification that the cleansing order had filed an advisory with the station's oversight committee, flagging several children in the transitional system as exhibiting cognitively atypical profiles potentially disruptive to species integration harmony. Myra's file number was in the advisory. Orrath sat very still for a long time. Then he read the advisory again. Then he cross-referenced the filing date with the 3 placement refusals. Then he understood that the directors had not been working from a shared training document. They had been working from a shared warning. The cleansing order. 14 years in this work, and he had crossed them twice before, once in a custody dispute with a Rillan family, once in a trade certification hearing that had nothing to do with children at all. They moved slowly, procedurally, and they were very good at making removal look like reassignment. He pulled up his registry access. The form he needed was Veth Kai Guardian Registration, Form 7C, the one that formally and legally attached a child's welfare file to a registered individual guardian pending full adoption review. He had never filed one himself. In 14 years, he had always placed children into family units, not claimed them. He read the form. The door hinge in the corridor outside gave a small, satisfied click. Then Myra's voice said, quietly pleased, "There, now it won't stick." Orrath looked at the photograph on his wall. His wife had been a systems engineer, quick with her hands and quicker with her thinking. She had said keep moving forward to him the night after his first failed placement, when he had come home certain the work was beyond him. She had made it sound simple. Forward was a direction anyone could find, as long as they didn't stop to stare at the wall. He opened Form 7C. He started filling it in. The cleansing order sent 2 representatives on the 43rd day. They arrived with an oversight compliance officer named Darren, who had the specific look of a man who had been told his involvement was purely procedural. Orrath met them in the main corridor of Level 7. Mira was not in his office. He had sent her to Solis on the agricultural tier an hour ago, on the pretext that the irrigation timer needed recalibrating. She had gone without complaint, which meant she had understood it wasn't about the timer. The lead cleansing order representative was a tall Vethkai woman with the pale gray coloring of the northern coastal clans, and a voice that carried mild reasonableness the way a blade carried an edge. "Officer Orrath, we're here about the transitional file for Case 7 Mira Caldwin. We have concerns about prolonged unsupported placement and the well-being of the child." "I've resolved the placement," Orrath said. The representative blinked. "I'm sorry." He produced the Form 7C, filed at the registry yesterday. "I am the registered guardian of record pending full review. The child is no longer in transitional status." The compliance officer, Darren, took the form and read it with the careful attention of a man reassessing whether he was still purely procedural. The cleansing order representative smiled in the way that meant she was recalculating. "Officer Orrath, guardian registration is an interim measure. The full review process takes 8 weeks. During that time, the Oversight Committee's advisory still." "The advisory applies to children in transitional placement," Orrath said. "Form 7C removes the child from transitional status immediately upon filing. See subsection 4. He let her find subsection 4. He had read it 4 times last night. The advisory has no jurisdiction." Darren looked up from the form. "He's right." The representative looked at Darren. "He's right," Darren said again, in the tone of a man deciding that procedural had been the correct word after all. "The advisory is moot. The child is guardian registered." There was a long pause. "The full review," the representative said finally, "will be rigorous." "I expect it to be," Orrath said. "I have 14 years of placement records, a clean conduct file, and a residential certificate from the agricultural tier. Solis signed it this morning." He had asked her by comm at sunrise. She had responded before he finished the message. The 2 cleansing order representatives left. Darren lingered. He was looking at the corrected door hinge on Orrath's supply cabinet, at the improved atmospheric sensor Mira had installed last week, where the old one had a dead zone in the upper register, at the small modifications and careful improvements visible through the office window. "She did all this?" Darren asked. "Most of it." Darren nodded slowly. He handed the Form 7C back, gave Orrath the look of a man who had never been purely procedural, and walked away without another word. Mira came back from the agricultural tier in the late afternoon, with dirt on her knees, and a small bag of vegetables Solis had sent, because Solis had decided that guardianship required nourishment. She stood in the doorway of the office and looked at Orrath. He said, "The placement process is over." She waited. "You're staying here, this office, this station with me. The registration is filed. There will be a review in 8 weeks and I intend to pass it." Mira looked at the photograph on the wall. She looked at the improved door hinge, the new atmospheric sensor, the dying plant she had quietly repotted into a better container 3 days ago without saying anything. She looked at the pressure differential reader she'd built in the elevator, sitting now on the corner of his desk because he had asked to keep it. "You don't have to do this," she said, not as an objection, as a fact she was giving him the chance to acknowledge. "I know. You could have found me another placement. I ran out of facilities. There are more in the next sector." "Mira." She looked at him. Her eyes were steady. He had noticed that about her from the beginning, the way she went very still when something mattered, like she was trying not to disturb the thought. "Your father was right," Orrath said, "about moving forward. My wife used to say the same thing." He looked at the photograph, then back at the girl in the doorway. "I've been standing in one place for a while." She considered this for a long moment. Then she stepped inside, put Solis's vegetables on the desk, and sat in the chair across from him. She pulled the pressure differential reader from her bag and set it beside his on the corner of the desk. "I made a second one," she said, "for you, in case you ever need to check a seal." Orrath looked at the two small devices sitting side by side on the corner of his desk. Hers more refined, his the original, both of them built from things other people had thrown away. "Thank you," he said. Mira held her breath a moment, the way she did when she was thinking. Then she let it out slowly, and for the first time in 6 weeks, she didn't immediately look for the next thing to fix. She sat in the chair across from him. Orrath reached for the Form 7C copy on his desk and filed it into the folder he had labeled, the night before, with her full name. Outside, the station turned through another cycle, lights brightening on the agricultural tier and dimming in the transit halls, and in a small office on level 7, 2 people who had each lost the thing they were moving forward for sat across from each other and found, without either of them announcing it, that they had somewhere new to go.